New conversations on Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
Right. Shall we stay with my, theme on a Tuesday of health and wellness? We're moving more to a conversation around wellness. So, and then this is something that we all confront on a daily basis, but I think we haven't really given it, we don't give it the respect, I suppose is the word, or we don't treat it with the seriousness that it deserves. I don't know whether it's a level, it's an issue of lack of awareness or what we put it down to. What am I talking about? Burnout, the real issue of burnout and mental health in the workplace. According to the latest Gallup report, 36% of the South African workforce experience excessive daily stress, and more than 71% are either disengaged or actively disengaged at work. These, the report says, are some of the alarming signs of burnout. This is not surprising, apparently, considering that according to the Mental State of the World report, South Africa, with a mental health quotient of 50, ranks 69 out of 79 countries and has the greatest percentage of distressed or struggling respondents at 35%. Now, studies have found the dedicated and committed are particularly prone to burnout, a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. All right, let's hear from our guests. Let me welcome our guests to help us discuss this subject. Firstly, let me welcome industrial psychologist Sendri Moralo. Good evening to you, and thank you for your time.
Good evening, TT, and good evening to your listeners.
And then let me also welcome from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, Cassie Chambers. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so let's start with you, Sendri Moralo, if I can. Maybe let's just firstly describe or how, from a clinical point of view or from a psychologist point of view, you define burnout. We use the word a lot, just colloquially. But what is the technical definition of burnout?
Thank you, Tabi. So, indeed, most of us, we are familiar with the term. I'm burnt out. We talk with friends, we talk at the workplace. So when we look into burnout is more than stress. It is a chronic state of physical and emotional exhaustion caused by unmanaged work demand, which is very interesting. And when you go further again, we look into now it is being classified as a occupational phenomena, meaning that it's not just a thing that we use casually. It's something that really, really can impact someone's life.
The levels, the numbers that I just shared are frightening, are staggering, quite frankly. I wonder to what extent people, as you have just been saying, we talk about burnout and so on, and we just kind of use that word interchangeably with fatigue. I wonder how many people are actually aware that they are burnt out or are approaching burnout stage until it's too late. And that's for you again, Sendri. Yeah.
Yes, and in most cases, people are not aware, because if you look into underlying issue when you're talking about burnout, particularly in South Africa, there's a lot of things that drive us to want to be on. Drawing from what happened a few years ago, COVID, it taught us that we can always be online. It exacerbated the use of fourth IR, where we are always on. There's a expectation from different leadership to say, if I want you at this particular time, I want to be always on, that we want to be promoted. Economic insecurity, we want to be promoted. We want to, to fit in with our community. We are recognized if we get bigger titles. So the more we put into our plate, the more people we think we're striving but underground it may lead to issues like burnout.
Mm.
So it's not easy. It can go on unnoticed until the day where it happens.
Mm. Cassie Chambers, coming to you, from the work that you do with the SA Depression and Anxiety Group, SADAG, to what extent do you find that the people that, you interact with, that you help, are actually dealing with issues of depression, anxiety, and so forth that are brought on by the load that they are carrying, this the extra load that they're carrying or the abnormal load that they are carrying in the workplace?
It's such a good question, and I think to put figures and facts to it, because we often think of mental health issues, depression, anxiety, burnout, as this kind of invisible disease, right? You can't see the symptoms. It's something in our head. And when we see the facts and the stats, it makes it so much more real, especially in South Africa. So we did a survey last year just looking and understanding working life and mental health in the workplace. And we surveyed nearly 1,000 people. And from those 1,000 employees, over 50% had been diagnosed. That means they've seen a doctor or a psychologist diagnosed with a mental health issue. And out of the top 5 mental health issues that employees were dealing with, depression was number 1, and then anxiety. That's a lot of people who have felt impaired enough or impacted enough to go and seek help. And I'm sure that there's a lot of other people who are maybe too afraid to go and seek help. They don't have the resources. They don't know who to speak to. They also have this fear that if I go and seek help, am I going to lose my job? Are they going to think of me as less than? So those that have been diagnosed, which is more than half of the, for over 50% of people who we surveyed, but there are probably so many more other employees and people that are working that have these symptoms who are too afraid to go and get help and get that professional diagnosis. And I think one of the biggest things that we see from the work on a daily basis is that we have people who are phoning us from work, who contact us after work, who are just feeling so overwhelmed. Mental health doesn't have working hours. It doesn't only happen at work. It also goes home with you. The stuff at home comes with you to work. You can't just switch it on and off. And I think what we've seen in so many people is that fear of talking about it, fear of getting help, fear of saying something, worried about, am I going to lose my job? Is my colleagues going to think of me less than? Am I going to be discriminated against? But also, am I okay? We've seen that also mental health issues impact our day-to-day functioning at work, where literally concentration is really hard, multitasking, making decisions. So depression and anxiety literally impacts how we're able to work. So it becomes this really difficult cycle that so many people find themselves in, which makes their situation worse, right? We think it will go away if we think more positively or pull up our socks, but it doesn't. If we leave it untreated and undiagnosed, it could lead to even more serious issues. And like you mentioned, it hits that episode where you're burnt out and you cannot function anymore. And we have so many people who phone us who say that they can't even get out of bed. They can't do anything anymore. And that's why talking about it, like tonight, we can prevent someone from getting to that space where it really becomes a massive problem.
And I'm speaking purely anecdotally here, Sandri Moralo, because, it's not what I'm saying is not based on some type of scientific research, but just on talking to a few people who are taking strain in the workplace. And I kind of feel like people who find themselves in those situations are on their own, literally, because I don't think that the employer is interested or even capacitated to deal with that or to help. They are pushing their bottom line, and not many employers or companies or businesses or organizations have the means, the resources to employ, an industrial psychologist such as yourself. It is often something that is left to HR, and I can't help but feel that that's so inadequate.
Yes, that's very important to highlight that many employees at the TT they're suffering in silence due to stigma and lack of access to support. In some instances, there will be one industrial psychologist or one mental health practitioner to about 5,000 employees with the support of HR. And even the lack of psychological safety within the organization. And when you're talking about psychological safety relating it to burnout, it involves training line managers. So if it's only one person and having to train over 2,000 line managers, it keeps on. We never get to cover everyone within the organization. That's really a challenge. And the more people are exposed to high work demand, it increases challenges that can lead to burnout.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just think, I mean, even in the workplace, I think, let me ask you this, Cassie, when those people that do speak about and express the challenges that they have had at work, or, the difficulties that they're experiencing, do you get a sense that they do have, support of some sort, or even a safe space where they can feel like, at least I'm being heard? Or, that what I'm saying has been taken seriously? Because...
And it's a really good point, because again it talks to that psychological safety. Do I feel comfortable to openly disclose that I'm not coping, or that I need help, or that I have a mental health issue? Does my line manager or my boss know what to do in that situation to handle it? And I think that's what more training needs to happen, right? Just having that conversation. Is that often if someone says I'm not coping, a boss or line manager might, hear them and say, okay, I hear you, but I still have these expectations, or I still expect this work to be done. They don't necessarily have the resources or the skills or the training to say, actually, well, let's relook at this. And I think it's also that perceived discrimination that might be happening, right, that prevents someone from speaking out, to say, well, if I had to open up, I might lose my job. I might not be up for that that raise or that increase or that promotion, and they're going to think that I'm weak, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yes.
So I think it's often that perceived stigma that prevents us from speaking out, or thinking that our manager can't. And you bring up such a good point, is that people often don't feel comfortable to speak to HR because we think, oh, it's going to be on my file, it's going to be on my record, they're going to tell my manager. And unfortunately, there have been cases where employees have had bad experiences, and I feel like that often sets a tone in a workplace. It's, even hearing someone else's story, then it's you get worried it might happen in your workplace, right? So someone else's bad experience with maybe a manager who's not trained to deal with the situation, or something's gone wrong, now has that ripple effect for so many other people. But there have been incidents where it makes a huge difference by having a manager who can have a safe conversation and say, actually, I hear you, what can we do differently? Do you need to leave earlier or go during lunch break to see your psychologist or your doctor? Or, do we look at a hybrid model? And there have been amazing managers and leaders and HR that have really looked at putting in those kinds of mechanisms, but it's not enough. We need to be doing more of that, and also role modeling that so that people feel safe. We often, as other employees, as you see how other people are being treated, you see what changes have been made. So you're seeing and saying, well, is it safe for me to now share? No, it's not. So I'm not going to. And I think it's all of those things that it's helping us to create conversations. It's also getting managers and leaders to think differently, and even colleagues to learn to have safe conversations with each other, and then taking it forward. So I think there has been changes, but we still see a huge amount of stigma, and I think a lot of it also comes from post-COVID, where we've seen workforces being reduced so much. There's less people working. You're having to work harder, longer hours, and there's that kind of desperation to hold on to my job. So I'm expected to work longer, work more, and I think it's all of that pressure on top of everything else that's happening around us, right? Nothing happens in isolation. We're worried about load shedding and financial and family problems, all of that comes together where it just becomes really difficult. So having to be super intentional about looking after our mental wellness all the time is also a huge responsibility for us as employees to really take on.
You know, by the way, my guests this evening, we are talking about burnout and mental health in the workplace. If this is something that you are currently maybe dealing with or have dealt with or have seen colleagues suffer burnout, where they've just at their wits' end, where they can take no more, please talk to us. We are on 0861 987 000. If it's a personal experience of yours, I'd love to hear from you. 0861 987 000. WhatsApp 083 303 7093. On X at Tabiso Dema or at Power FM 987. Please use the hashtag Power Perspective. Now, you know, Sandra Moralo, we are not, we are all different as human beings, but the place of work, corporate in particular, well, maybe not even in particular, just I think generally workplaces, I think maybe we perhaps we need a change of either our language or we need a change of culture in the workplace because, you know, we revere people that we call workaholics. We revere people that we celebrate people who burn the midnight oil, you know, who are that's the kind of language that we speak, and those are the kind of people that tend to rise, who go above and beyond, you know. And I mean, if those are the sort of things that are celebrated and elevated, is it any wonder that people are not willing to come out and say, you know, I've had enough. I'm not coping, you know. And also, what is to be the measure of that? Who measures what is enough? You know, just because someone else can pull 16-hour days and I can't, doesn't mean that there's a problem with me. And this is why I'm saying, like, who is ultimately is the measure? I think I've asked you two questions in one there.
Yes, Tabiso. The important when you're looking into burnout is to talk about the job demands and the job resources. And when we're talking about the job demands is to say, what is expected of me? What is my job description?
Mm-hmm.
How do I contribute within the organization? Let's go back to my contract. Do I work 8 hours? Do I work 9 hours? Everything. And the job resources, do I have a computer? Do I have the number of people that I need? So in most situations, or what leads to burnout is that there is no balance between the job demands and the job resources. That's why we see a lot of people coming out having issues, psychological issues. And what is very important in this situation is to have leaders, is to have colleagues model this behavior to say, in this organization, how do we go forward? As a leader, including things that I don't reach out to you after hours. As colleagues, if I want to work at night, maybe delay my emails, sending them tomorrow morning. Or when we meet out after hours, talking about something different, cultivating environments within the organization where we can ask and say, what did you do over the weekend? And allow for people to realize life without the organization. And we know that now where the economy and the reality we're living in is that a lot of people find themselves wanting to be active and to always contribute and always be online and burn the midnight oil. But the truth is that we need some break at some point. And we have to work together. It's no longer those days where we just have one day as a wellness day. We talk a hoo-ha about mental health and it's gone. We have to practice it on a day-to-day to ensure that change is embedded within organization and individuals.
Let me get you, Cassie Chambers, to have a bite at that as well. Change. Yeah. We need a change of culture, you know, in the workplace.
Absolutely. You mentioned something about where it's almost celebrated. You get this kind of badge of honor if you said, I pulled an
Absolutely.
all-nighter, or I worked all weekend. And those are bad examples, because then we start creating the culture, well, that's what's expected. We have to burn ourselves out. And I think this is where we really speak to leaders in a workplace. And it doesn't always have to be a manager. It could be the most senior person in a department. It could be a colleague or a team leader to say, actually, let's respect and put in some of those boundaries so that we also role model that intentional well-being. So, not expecting people to respond to messages after hours or emails.
Yeah.
Actually encouraging people like to take the weekend off, and what are you doing to self-care or to relax or to de-stress? Being really mindful, and it's hard because sometimes there's deadlines or emergencies, but it's really being mindful to put in those different kind of boundaries. So you're teaching other people about what it means about work time and afterwards. And I think it's also just checking in with our colleagues around mental health check-in. How are you really doing today? How are you coping?
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being fantastic, where are you right now? And I think we often just expect it has to be a manager that does it, or, head of HR. But we can do that for our own colleagues and check in, right? And I think it's having to really look at intentionally focusing on well-being, giving it everyone's job to look after each other and ourselves, and putting in those boundaries. And instead of expecting people or even saying, sending emails at 10 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning, putting those notifications off. Again, in the survey that we did last year, which was really surprising, is that over 70% of employees battled to switch off about thinking about work after work hours. When you go to bed and you're lying awake thinking of your to-do list or the email you didn't send or all the stuff, it's really having to make sure that we find that time to de-stress, that we're finding time to decongest after a busy day, so that we don't burn out, and that it impacts our daily functioning. So I think there's so much that has to change, and creating safer conversations within the workplace. So instead of in that next meeting, instead of just going straight to an agenda, do a check-in. Check in with your staff. How are you really doing? Those small things can all role model better culture in the workplace that actually favors and prioritizes well-being.
Final thoughts are from you, Sandri Moralo?
Tabi, so it's very important that we model the behavior from leaders. I have worked with leaders who are afraid to go and pick up medication, antidepressant, because they don't want it on their medical record. I've worked with leaders who say, I don't want to share that I'm going to see you, and it's very challenging. It's time where leaders allow themselves to be vulnerable, and even by being vulnerable, they enable their teammates or their subordinates to be able to come into the party and be vulnerable and say, I need help. How can you help me? Modeling the behavior is a way to go. And even the culture of saying, I'm going to push you to realize your potential and stuff.
Yeah.
We have to trigger it somehow in this day and age to say, let's work together. How can I support you to become the best? Let's co-create the future and the workplace that we want. It's very important in this time.
Wonderfully put. Thank you so much, and a wonderful note on which to end it. Cassie Chambers from the SA Depression and Anxiety Group, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much. And I think just a big shout out to creating that conversation.
Yes.
Anyone can start that conversation, and they can learn, and they can go and watch more videos, get more tips and tools, even learning what to say and what not to say. So anyone can learn, and they can even go to SADAG's website at sadag.org and access information. I think the more we talk about it, the more we shed light, we create safe conversations. And it lets one other person know that they're not alone. So we encourage them to seek help, whether it be in their workplace or outside, like the experts that we've got on tonight, or even just phoning a counsellor for free at the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. The biggest thing is talk, and get help.
I thought you were going to give us that number there.
I can definitely do that. It's toll free, so it's free from any cell phone or landline 24 hours a day, 0800 567 567.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Cassie Chambers. I really appreciate your time. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you, you too.
And Sandra Moralo, we have started a conversation. We certainly will have to revisit it. It's not a conversation you have in one night. But thank you so much for your insights as well and perspective. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tabiso.
And good night to you. Yes, so there you go. We will continue to revisit this subject. It is one that a lot of people are dealing with, but suffering in silence. That whole mental health issues in the workplace, the whole thing about burnout. We all talk about it like, you often hear people say things like, and especially when it gets closer to the end of the year, oh, I've had it, I'm burnt out, and that kind of stuff. We use it very glibly, but it's actually something quite serious. So yeah, if you want to share anything, your experiences, please feel free to drop us a voice note on 083 303 7093.